All statements and opinions expressed by guests of the Adult in the Room podcast are strictly their own and do not necessarily reflect the beliefs or opinions of the host, producers, or advertisers. All interviews are presented in their most complete possible form in the interests of free speech. No statements should be interpreted as financial, legal, or medical advice. Listener and viewer discretion are strongly advised.
It's the Adult in the Room podcast with Victoria Taft. That's me. It's a special emergency edition of the Adult in the Room podcast with Victoria Taft. And, at times like these, when Hamas, through Iran's help, and now Hezbollah, decide that they're going to attack Israel and kill Jews for the reason that they hate them? Is that what's going on here? People are out in the streets around the country and around the world celebrating the attack by Hamas and Hezbollah. And so don't discount the efforts later that will be made by people who say, oh, though nobody was in the streets celebrating. Nobody was doing that, remember? Yeah, they were. And they were doing it on the streets of Seattle, Los Angeles, New York, as well as other places around the world, singing and chanting, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free," which means that all Jews between the river and the sea would be exterminated. And that's the message they wanted to send, and that's what is underway in Israel. Of course, Israel has fought back, and everything's in flux. And as we know, the first victim of war is the truth. And so we're not going to get into the intricacies of he said, she said, oh, this attack here, because we've already seen misinformation being perpetrated on social media right now. And so that is a dead end. The first reports are always wrong. They always are. So we're going with big ideas, big themes, the efforts to make some sense out of this geographically, and to find out what one would do personally in case something like that happens here. And now, why wouldn't it? I know you say, Victoria, don't sound crazy. Why wouldn't it? We've got 7 million people who've come over the southern border, many of them adult, military-aged men. Why would you think they would, pick strawberries, as one of my guests put it? And indeed, Wayne Black is a security expert. We're going to talk with him. And whenever there's a geopolitical tornado that goes on in the world today, we take a look and talk to Paul Vallely, Major General Paul Vallely, U.S. Army retired. Will be by in a few minutes to tell us what he thinks is going on and why this all seems to make sense to him, connecting dots and that sort of thing geopolitically. So I hope that you appreciate the efforts underway by these people on this special edition of the Adult in the Room podcast. And by all means, follow and support, share this podcast. That's what helps us survive, and it's what screws over the big tech algorithm. Thanks for watching. Since last we met, we have seen the invasion of Israel, the attack on Israel from Hamas forces who are bankrolled by the Iranians. At least that's the story they're telling. But we both know that the first victim of war is the truth. And there are certain main things that we should probably pay attention to instead of going off on the secondary, tertiary things that may change, because as we all know, as we said, truth is always the first victim of war. But we also know that the first iteration of the story doesn't usually stand up. We do have some ideas, some educated ideas, but really what it comes down to is we need to be secure in what we know we can do. And that's why we've asked Wayne Black, who's a security expert. He's former security with Donald Rumsfeld, a former SecDef, and he has a security company, and he is an expert in these kinds of things. And Wayne, thank you so much for coming on the Adult in the Room podcast. Tell me what we should know about a situation like has happened in Israel?
Well, it's a big mess, as you know. First, thanks for having me.
Thank you.
So there's some video coming out of Israel that's real-time video. The Israeli news is broadcasting a lot, so we learn a lot from that, and of course we hear a lot of talking heads on the air. I'm really concerned not only about them, about what's happening and the new attacks coming from Hezbollah from the north through Lebanon. I'm concerned about what might happen here. I mean, just think of what's happened at the southern border. We've caught a bunch of terrorists. We've got 8 million people coming over. What about the ones that were not dumb enough to get caught? And we know that there's hundreds of people coming from Lebanon, Syria, Nigeria, all Al-Qaeda, Hezbollah, Hamas countries. They're not coming here to pick strawberries. So I wonder if I worry about what's going to happen for our schools and synagogues and houses of worship.
You know, this is at a time where we have not been keeping track of who's coming across the border. Joe Biden and Secretary Mayorkas have done all they can do to open the floodgates into the United States from south of the border. And there are people from all over the world, military-aged men, walking over the border. You and I both know that there are fighting seasons. There are kinds of people who will participate in offensive action against a combatant, and we might be that guy. And here they come. They're walking across the border. Some of them have been armed. Some of them have been known terrorists. But as you say, how many of them have been not dumb enough to get caught? Unbelievable.
Well, too many. I went to a pro-Palestinian rally over the weekend in Fort Lauderdale that was at the corner of Sunrise and Federal Highway, and there across the street there was a pro-Israel rally, and so you can imagine what happened. What I noticed, though, that was pretty interesting is the pro-Israel rally. The Israelis drove up, parked in a bank parking lot, got out, put on T-shirts with the Star David on them, and held up flags and played music. Around the corner, I saw the pro-Palestinian, anti-Israel people park their cars at a distance, rode bicycles, walked up. Some had rental cars, so they wouldn't be identified. And then the two groups clashed in the middle of the street. There were probably 15 or 20 police cars there. They shut down traffic in all directions in Fort Lauderdale, and had to break them up. And then I watched the one in New York. So the vitriol, the anger from the pro-Palestinians, and even from some universities. You look at what Harvard said today, that Israel deserved it and all those kinds of things. That's just going to foster more here. So I worry about copycats, and we used to say lone wolf, but now we say known wolf. That could do certain things here in the country. I'm very concerned about that. We in security and law enforcement, we have to be right every time. They only have to be right once.
What does it say to you that people feel free to get in the middle of the streets and, as you say, hide their footprints so that we don't know where they came from?
Well, that's part of their plan, and that at the end of the day, the side with the best plan wins. If our plan is better, we win, and if their plan is better, in this case, more covert, then they would win. But I'm predicting we're going to have at least some low-level terror attacks here in the United States. I pray we don't have another 9/11. But remember, 13 people did 9/11, and we've allowed in millions of people, hundreds of thousands of people from those terrorist countries into the United States.
Just unbelievable, isn't it? It is. Joe Biden is, continues his 40-year reign as one of the dumbest foreign policy individuals ever. Robert Gates, the former SecDef, said that basically those words, he's never made a good decision ever, foreign policy-wise. This appears to be more of the Obama administration, we love Iran fan club. We understand that, of course, there is an Iranian spy ring in the United States State Department, I believe it is. We've just busted that. They've got and so we're not being real smart, is what I'm thinking. Why?
No, we're not, and I don't know why. I mean, look who was the foreign policy advisor during the Obama administration, Valerie Jarrett, and she's still hanging out. That's right, she's from Tehran, and we wonder why Iran has got preferential treatment. They say that they're backing Hamas. Hamas says that they're backing Hamas. We see it. We know it from weapons and munitions and things like that. And if they run out, they've always got the Taliban weapons, the 80 billion in weapons that we left behind when we surrendered Afghanistan.
We are hearing reports that some of those weapons are likely to be from Afghanistan, from all the armor, from the planes to the material that we left behind, billions of dollars.
Right, they're our weapons now being used against our ally Israel.
It's big gobsmacking when you hear about that. We also know that in previous years, of course, the JCPOA, the Iranian deal, where we shrink wrapped billions of dollars or pounds, whatever, euros, to send over to the Iranians, was done in hopes that, well, gosh, we're telling everybody they're not going to restart their nuclear program if they ever stopped it. But then we find out that this nuclear power, that has the centrifuges humming, is also going to be able to get those nuclear weapons in the future, because that was part of the deal. And the Obama administration lied to us about that, at least according to Lee Smith. I have no trouble believing that whatsoever. So now what do you have? So assess the security situation for us. We have a nuclear power that hates us. They've sent their proxies, Hamas as well as Hezbollah, and to attack our best ally. And they want to start, what are they doing here? Are they trying to start World War III? Are they deking us out while Ukraine's going on? China's going to do something else. Russia's doing something else. Iran and Russia are tied at the hip. What do you think?
It's obvious how weak we are. If you look around the globe, I predict that China will go into Taiwan during this time. We can't do all these things at the same time. We'll be lucky if we can do two of them and still protect the homeland. So it's just a mess, and it's gaining momentum because of our inaction. On one hand, a week before this, we release a bunch of hostages, and we all predicted that if we release hostages, right, we paid ransom, and we all predicted that if you do that, you'll create more hostage takers, and look what we have. I believe that there may even be some members, I haven't heard confirmed reports, of various police departments in the United States that were visiting Israel that may be hostages. So we don't know that for sure, but 100%
I'm sure it's bad.
100% there are American hostages over there.
Yes, we know that. We do know that. We believe that. We know Americans have been killed over there. People who have, they have their GoPro cameras on and they're showing them going into Israeli homes and shooting the dog and shooting the kids and we believe, but and I don't think I need to tell you this, Wayne Black, this is also a region in which over the years we've seen the crisis actors, Pallywood, if you will, take over, wherein they serve up fake news, put it on the internet, and hope that it will explode and create other reactions that are not based in fact. How big a problem is this?
Well, part of that we call it psychops, psychological operations, and it involves fake news and things like that. Part of that is the part of waging war. I think we'll see hacks and all kinds of things coming from those that are using Hezbollah and Hamas as proxies from probably China and from Iran. It'll be one of those deals where here's the latest news and you click on it and your phone might go dead. So people should really be aware of that phishing and things right now. Same thing with banking activity. If there was ever a time for people to be careful about an exe file that they click on, now it is.
Didn't even think about that aspect of it. How bizarre that we have to think about it. Well, now, domestically, we have people pouring over the border, don't know who they are. We have no idea who these people are. And this is at a time when the left is trying to disarm Americans and have come out along the West Coast, and we just did a podcast. This latest podcast is all about the efforts on the federal court level to minimize and disarm Americans. And now we've got this kind of threat. I'd like you to characterize for me, if you could, what kind of leader allows an open border, an open checkbook, and disarming its population or attempting to? Whose side is that person on?
Well, it's the administration. I don't think our current leader knows what room he's in from time to time, but who's ever pulling the strings behind the curtain, it's like the Wizard of Oz thing, don't pay attention to the guy behind the scenes. Whether it's Valerie Jarrett, Susan Rice, whoever it is, they can't be this unconcerned. They have to be doing this on purpose to tear apart the country. And look where we're going. And with all these, 8 million, 9 million, 10 million people, we don't know who they are. We don't check them for diseases when they come in the border. Most of them are military age males. I think we're in real trouble. And I think with all of that activity comes the partial destruction of the America that we know. We've got to stop this and get it turned around. I don't have the answers on how to do it. But right now, because of what's happening over there and what may happen here, it's a matter of survival. Just think, talking about guns, just think if those people over there had firearms in their homes, at least they could have defended themselves a little bit. That may have changed the dynamic a little bit. We suffer from what I call normalcy bias, Victoria. We think that it only happens someplace else, that it doesn't happen here until it does. And I see that when I visit schools around the country. Well, it was Sandy Hook, it was Columbine, it was Parkland, it was Uvalde, but it probably won't happen at our school. And I talk to school administrators, they go, well, I don't know if we need those cameras, and we don't have enough money, and I think we're pretty good. So that's called a false positive insecurity. Just because we haven't had an attack yet, we think that what we're doing is correct, and it's not.
I mean, you see that surreal image of either, some sort of bomb or what have you being dropped or people parachuting in. It looks like it could be either. This could be another, victim of war, the truth about whatever happened outside that big concert. But the end result is undeniable. People were shot at point blank range. There are bodies strewn about. There's a body of a woman who's being paraded around. There have been children murdered in their mother's arms. And I don't want to get too emotional about it because clearly this is emotional. And I don't think that this is the time for emotion. I think this is the time for resolve. And people have got to be really smart here. And they have to get ready for something like that. Now, synagogues, the Saturday crowd and the Sunday crowd, they have to plus up their security, don't they?
They sure do. And it has to be on their perimeter, not on the inside. It doesn't help if you got a bunch of parishioners, a bunch of church or synagogue goers that have a concealed permit that have not been to the range and they say, well, I'm carrying a gun. No. If you've got to go to gun inside a church, your plan has failed. The trick is to stop whatever it is from coming on the outside and to look for it from coming into the church. And the way to do that is for synagogues to get involved in local law enforcement, the JTTF, the Terrorism Task Force, talk to them, have a plan, and have a one choke point, one way in and one way out of the church, and protect that. And if somebody doesn't belong there, don't let them in.
You know, this is the double-edged sword. This is the problem that the left has created in this country, And it is that, the Joint Terrorism Task Force is made up of police officers, and there are different police agencies, including the FBI on it. The FBI has already deployed itself to spy on conservative churchgoers in the Catholic Church and who knows where else. Why would one go to the FBI on the JTTF and ask for help and alert them to the fact that you might have armed people at your church? Doesn't that just send them? I mean, this is the kind of conundrum we've created for ourselves. And you basically just told on yourself, and you could get raided by the feds before you get raided by some bad actors from the outside.
Well, remember, members of the JTTF are local law enforcement too, and they get it, and they just hopefully share the intelligence. But I would talk to them about not telling them who's armed inside the church so much as I'd say, look, we're interested. What can we do? I would ask the local sheriff or police chief, can you have a patrol car at the synagogue or hire an off-duty police officer for that presence? Bad guys are looking for soft targets, and they want to succeed, right? So remember in 1993, the Ramsey Youssef plan at the World Trade Center, they set off. They didn't succeed really in taking down the World Trade Center.
They killed 6 people, but
that's
yeah,
right.
That's true. It could have killed more.
So that became a target later. So look, I talked to rabbis from time to time, and I had a rabbi tell me not too long ago, well, there's this guy who's Arab who wanted to be converted to Judaism, and so I gave him a tour of the synagogue and I signed him up for class, and I said, he never came back, did he, Rabbi? He said, no. Well, all you did was show him what the inside of the synagogue looked like, the doors and things like that. So people have to have common sense.
You worked with Rummy. He was in the thick of this stuff. What did you learn?
What an honor that was. I spent 10 years with him, and what a great guy. We traveled all over Central Asia together. Everything that ended in a Stan, Mongolia, Azerbaijan, all those places. What a great guy, and he was so brilliant. And it was a great experience being with him.
Mm-hmm. So like I say, truth is the first thing that is the first victim of war. With him, of course, you had the Iraq situation. You had, we only go to war with the army we have. People don't like that real speak. They don't like to hear the real stuff. But now, you've had some time to take a look at moves we've made in the past. Were there any mistakes? Were there any moves that you would suggest against now, knowing what you know now?
Well, the most clear one really is the way we got out of Afghanistan without leaving some footprint behind. That was terrible. That was after the secretary died, and I can only imagine what he would have said. One of the things about truth, one of his famous sayings that he repeated over and over again, it's in one of his books, and it's this: a lie travels halfway around the world before the truth gets out of bed. And that's true. And so we operate a lot of times based on lies before we find out the truth.
What did you do with him?
I was the lead on his security detail when we traveled in the U.S. with book signings, and with when we traveled to the Rumsfeld Fellowship countries, the Caucasus and Central Asia. I traveled with him and organized in advance security and safety for him. And it was easier in some ways to protect him in Asia and some of those countries than it was here in the United States, because there were some haters. So he went to CPAC, hundreds of book signings. He had 3 books, Known and Unknown, Rumsfeld's Rules, and When the Center Held, about his relationship with Gerald Ford. All great books. He really, I don't think he thought he needed security. He accepted it. But he's an old wrestler, remember, from Princeton. So he's that one-on-one kind of a guy who, yeah, absolutely. And that's his whole life. And that's the way he operated. But what a great experience with traveling with him.
Very much enjoyed Rumsfeld's Rules. We listened to it as an audiobook, and he read his own audiobook, which was awesome, because you have to hear his voice. It's a special. You get to hear his voice. And my daughter loved his book because, it was just really, it was good rules for life is basically what this was.
Yeah.
And so
when we would, Victoria, when we would go to book signings, Barnes and Noble, whoever it was, they say, okay, you have 2 hours at this book signing, and then we're going to go to the next event. He would never leave. He stood up the whole time at a little lectern and signed books and talked to people and shook their hands. As if there was one person in line, he would not leave. So some of those 2-hour book signings lasted 4 hours,
Wow.
5 hours. He wouldn't leave.
Mm-hmm. So you're thinking that we will, moving to the thing we really don't want to think about is that we could have a situation as happened in Israel happen here, right?
I think we will. It may not be to that scale, but I think we'll have one-offs here and there. I think we should brace for that. It's so obvious. What gets us in trouble is when we have normalcy bias. We can't think it will happen here. We don't. Our psychic doesn't allow us to think like the enemy. Who would believe that these animals would be shooting women and children and grandparents and taking them hostage? So our psychic doesn't allow us to imagine that. So in some ways we're in denial. Anybody in our field is not, but I'm really worried about that.
We can worry, but we have to make plans.
We have to be diligent. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So a homeowner, what do you suggest?
Well, depending on where you live, I think if you're in a state where you can have a concealed firearm, I would carry one. There's a saying: if you ever need a firearm and you don't have one with you, you probably won't need one again. And so I think homeowners should be able to protect themselves, consistent with children around the home. We don't want to have access to firearms for kids. And I feel sorry for those people in those states like California and the high crime areas, California, Baltimore, New York, where guns are, Chicago, where guns are illegal and they have a mass shooting every weekend.
Well, they're legal, but the problem is that they are so dragged down. Getting them are so dragged down with regulation that they are almost impossible to get in some cases, and it makes you really mad because these, especially Black women in urban areas who are trying to mother children in the middle of chaos, would like to have a gun, please. And by the way, when they call the cops, they'd sure like to have a cop show up. But what have we done to them? What have we done to that feeling of domestic tranquility? We have just effed it up.
Yep. Look, in an attack, you're really on your own, Yeah. We say when seconds count, the police are only minutes away. You're on your own. The police are reactive. You are your own first responder. So in those no-gun cities, or those ones where they make it super hard to get, almost impossible in Chicago and New York, to get a concealed permit or even possess a firearm, you're on your own. Now, the bad guys have guns, of course.
Of course they do.
And
they have larger than 10 round magazines, too, because they don't care about magazine limits.
and in New York and some cities, we arrest them and let them out the next day to do more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Isn't it funny? Crooks, they don't follow the rules. Who knew?
No.
Thank you. Appreciate you coming on.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Well, whenever something of this impact happens in the world, we like to turn to Major General Paul E. Vallely, U.S. Army retired, and ask a man who has stayed in the game and has kept his sources going and advises world leaders what's going on. And he is also the chairman of Stand Up America U.S. Foundation. He keeps his hand in. He writes books. I would personally know about this. His latest one that's soon to be coming out is Invisible Treason in America, America's Endgame for the 21st Century, another title of his, Reality Prism, and Mindless War. Paul Vallely, thank you so much for coming back on the Adult in the Room podcast. In general, well, what do you make of this attack by Hamas?
Thank you, Victoria. Yeah, it's great to be back with you again. It seems every week there's something. We never saw this up and down when Trump was the president, but, it appears everybody sees America is so weak now, not knowing what they're doing from day to day. A president that's got diminished mental capacity. to say the least. And so people see America as weak. So you have all these situations going on: Ukraine, Russia, Chinese threat against Formosa, Armenia and Azerbaijani, turmoil in the monetary markets. BRICS, of course, now will probably expand to 40 different countries, and we can explain that later if you'd like. But and now you had Yom Kippur, the 40th anniversary of Yom Kippur. You had Shabbat on Friday night. And so it was an opportune time for Hamas to conduct an offensive operation against innocent Israelis. Now, I don't call it terrorism anymore, Victoria. Hamas is very well organized, funded by Iran. They have a hierarchy. They've got a command structure. They've got logistics. They've got the internet, which they use. And I'm not sure how much cyber they're into, but certainly this was instigated and processed and planned with the Hamas leadership. It's just horrible what's been done. Now I think you're going to see all the Muslims all over Europe. They're going to start protests and all that and everything. But Israel, in my opinion, they could have done it before, but they bowed to international influence, and they never removed Hamas from the Palestinian Gaza Strip. And so now I think you'll see a ground operation going on, sort of like Pac-Man as they chew away at Gaza and then remove the leadership and take over again. I was in Gaza when the actual Israelis had troops inside Gaza years ago, and then they pulled them all out. But I think Netanyahu has finally decided this has got to come to an end. And so I think they'll occupy Gaza. But you can't go block by block. That is the worst kind of warfare there is in what we call city fighting. You know, you got snipers in buildings, you got hand grenades being thrown at you. So I think they'll throw around the edges until they wear Hamas down. Now, they cut out the electricity and food and water going into Gaza. That they did that yesterday. And if anybody knows Gaza and Israel, they feed Gaza. Israel does through a couple checkpoints, the main one being in the North Gaza. That's where all your trucks come in every day bringing food, medicine, water, and so on. Now, that's all been shut off. So the next 24 hours, I think you'll see a ground operation.
So it turns out, I read here, that not only did Iran back Hamas with its words and, of course, the billions we gave them, but the Wall Street Journal reports that it helped Hamas plan this attack. And then furthermore, we find out that according to the Wall Street Journal, in another story, the Biden administration and its suspended envoy, Robert Malley, helped to fund, support, and direct an Iranian intelligence operation designed to influence the United States and allied governments. And in addition, Malley, who's this individual, helped infiltrate an Iranian agent of influence named Arian Tabatabai into some of the most sensitive positions in the United States government, first at the State Department and now the Pentagon, where she has been serving as chief of staff for the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Special Operations, Christopher Meir.
Well, we know we've been infiltrated not only by the Chinese Communist Party, but the Iranians have had agents in our country for a very long time. And when I was working with the Iranian opposition people, they tagged them by name, or where they actually infiltrated into Wall Street, into corporations, and into our different government organizations. So we've been totally infiltrated, not only by the Chinese, but also by the Iranians, thousands of Iranians in this country with their agents, paid agents, by the way. And then you got the paid cartels that are conducting warfare on our southern border. And so It's a bad situation for America. I'm not sure how we're going to overcome it right now.
Lee Smith writes in a column in Tablet, he also writes for the Epoch Times, says and asks the question, how did we get here? How did we get here? The current state of affairs, he writes, began when Joe Biden's former boss, Barack Obama, legalized a terror state's nuclear weapons program, and goes on to explain how, indeed, it wasn't they'll never make a bomb. We've just gotten into an agreement with them not to make a bomb. But in fact, there was a statute of limitations on that agreement. There was a sunset clause wherein Iran was always going to get nuclear weapons. And Paul Vallely, you got the big picture. We've got this attack on our most trusted our ally, and we've done deals with Iran. We're paying ransom, and we have unknown people of military age coming through the border on the southern border. You can do the math. When's the dirty bomb going to show up?
Well, that we don't know. I'm not even sure our intelligence system in the CIA is any good anymore. They seem to be more focused with the FBI on America, MAGA, white extremists. If they want to, that's the enemy to them now. They're not doing the job. I would close the CIA down tomorrow and open up something else on Monday. Same with the FBI. It's got to be closed down and changed. I mean, these organizations are supporting the left-wing Communist Democratic Party. There's no doubt about it. Their puppet, Obama, is running the government, not Biden. And he's a puppet of Obama. Obama's running the whole show there. And, of course, a lot of that's orchestrated by the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab, and the global elitists. And the financiers, they're running everything. Now, the two people that understand that more than anybody are Putin in Russia and Xi in China. They know these globalists, what they're up to. But yet we bought into it in our administration, and they're running our government right now, for sure. People don't...
What do you mean? What do you mean?
Victoria, I get so frustrated every day. I meet people, or intelligence, graduate students, or graduates of college, university. They can't connect the dots of what's happening globally to reduce America down, dismantle America, change America forever. That quote was given to Obama to use, and he used it in his campaign. Change America forever. America, wake up. That's what you got to do.
What do we do?
We got to wake up. We got to start standing up. They're going to try to demand vaccines again. They're going to create some kind of a natural disaster to forego the 2024 election because they know Trump's going to win. They're up to no good. What are the governors doing? What is the Supreme Court doing about all the laws that are being violated by these district attorneys and by these wackos that are in the justice system under Garland? What are they doing? The Supreme Court just can't sit there and wait for stuff to come to them as far as a hearing. They're the third-party government. They should be on these violations that are going on all over the country by the Department of Justice. What are the state governors doing to stand up under the 10th Amendment, challenging the federal government on government overreach, shutting down energy, shutting down food supplies? So you see, that's where it has to be, action has to be taken there. Now, the sheriffs also, and the police, the sheriffs, for example, they can set up as many in a posse as they want to. Did you know that? Down in Texas, the sheriff bringing in, they could be deputizing 2,000 to 3,000 people who would volunteer to do it. And they're not doing that. They're fighting the best they can in Texas. But anyhow, we could be doing a lot more. The Stand Up America U.S. Foundation, we put out a plan to take out the cartels in 7 days with the military special operation. I gave it to Trump. They didn't do anything. They just played defense. And so we have the cartels killing just thousands and thousands of our people in this country, feeding the criminality in many ways in our cities. So the governor should be using the National Guard to police these cities up, clean them up, get these people into therapy or whatever has to be done. All of these things are doable. What's Congress Democrats doing? They sit on their ass. McCarthy wouldn't follow through on what he was supposed to do. The Republicans are so weak now, it's just unbelievable. There's no fighters. There's no warriors. And now we see this deluge of dismantling America occurring, and they're still going along in Washington, D.C. of things are normal. We're going to have a normal election. Well, we are, I can tell you that. So just naivety and lack of initiative to solve problems.
You think that this Hamas attack, and now Hezbollah is coming on board from the north to attack Israel, and that is connected to what's happening in the United States because of our weakened condition, correct?
Yeah, well, Hezbollah has been ready for years. I've been up on the border, and they have hundreds of rockets that are in place in southern Lebanon. And I would think that the Hezbollah was going to launch something in the north there, at some point in time. And that fostered again and propelled by the leadership in Iran, in Tehran. So they're stirring up the pot all over the place. Saudi Arabia is trying to come closer to Israel, and so that's put on the back burner right now. Qatar, some people call Qatar, they're the financial banking system for extreme, I'll say for the Muslims, for the extremists in that area. All your terrorist organizations are funded through the banks in Qatar. What are we doing to shut that down? What's our Treasury Department doing? I mean, I don't see America taking any action to build us back again. Biden has destroyed us so much in 3 years that it's just it's sad to see America diminished, but yet not fighting hard enough to restore our sanity and our Constitution and peace in our cities without all these criminal mass burglaries that are going on by these young blacks and others. It's just horrible.
Thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate it. He is Major General Paul E. Vallely, U.S. Army retired, and this is what he thinks is going on. It's Connect the Dots time on the Adult in the Room podcast. Thanks again, Major General. And appreciate you coming on.
Okay, Terry. Thank you for having me. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Adult in the Room podcast. To keep the programs you like to listen to, please rate this podcast with a fantastic 5 stars on your Apple Podcast app every time you listen. And give me a great review. Plus, of course, subscribe to the podcast. It makes a difference with the big tech algorithm and the big tech oligarchs, and it makes us easier to find. Please get in touch with me on all the big tech stuff. Yeah, we're still there. Using the names Victoria Taft or the Adult in the Room podcast on MeWe, Parler, Minds, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thanks to 1ACast for imaging, editing, and production. The fantastic song is Gospel by the March 4th Band of Portland, Oregon. Music for Antifa versus Mike Strickland is Ride or Die by Raps by RC. The Adult in the Room podcast is also a production of Flamingo Road Studios. Remember, head up, heart out, and strive to be the adult in the room. Till next time, mischief managed.